Hi, I'm Bede Hill, and this is The D Word, the show where we talk dementia. Welcome along to our first new chat of 2024. My guest this week is Mark Stephen Porro, a Hollywood actor, producer and director whose life changed dramatically when his mother's health started failing. Mark's story is told in the book A Cup of Tea on the Commode, and we'll be finding out all about it after this.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
This year. That kicks off this week's edition of The D Word, where my guest is Mark Stephen Porro. Well, Mark, it's great to meet you and welcome you to the D Word. Plenty to talk about, particularly the book, which we'll come on to. But I mean, you had a successful career going. You were over there in Los Angeles. And then suddenly your life changed dramatically, didn't it? I mean, just tell us a little bit about the story.
Well, okay. So I was at 55, I was a carefree bachelor. I was a carefree bachelor the 44 years before that as well. But having a good time, enjoying life. They say I had commitment issues. Okay, I may have to cop to that. But I had a business and I was an actor, but I was aging out of acting. And so that career was slowing down. But my snack food company business was booming, not booming, but it was very time consuming. And then I got a call from my brother who said our mother just kind of shut down. And she was living in the house I grew up in a little town, Ridgewood, New Jersey. And he said she just shut down and seemed to be very depressed and almost seemed like a self-induced coma. And so he put her to bed and called the doctor. The doctor cut off all meds and food and said, she's going, so let her go. And then hospice was called, and I freaked out a little bit because hospice was called 14 years earlier for my dad, and 2 days later he died. So I flew in, and she had 6 children. I'm the fifth. I'm the youngest of 3 sons, and I have 1 younger sister and 2 older sisters. And we all came, and we came to say goodbye. It seemed like she was going. We had a priest come in and give the last rites. And but my younger sister and I stayed with hospice and learned as much as we could because we didn't know how long Mom was going to be with us, but we wanted to care for her as much as possible. So we wanted to learn from the pros. And so we stayed on. It was basically a waiting game to see what was going to happen. And she didn't open her eyes. Very infrequently, she opened her eyes, and she stared at a spot in the corner of her bedroom, and but didn't speak any words. And then a few weeks later, again, no food, maybe a little moisture on her lips to keep her mouth moist. But that was about it. No, she would respond a little bit to touch, but didn't talk at all. And one of the hospice nurses broke the rules. We found out that several of them break the rules, and but this one actually did a good thing. So she went in and she asked our mother, again, lying, eyes closed, and she said, "Are you hungry?" And my mother's eyes opened up for the first time in weeks. And then this nurse accused us of starving our mother to death. So we got very upset with her, and we said, go call your supervisor because you broke the rules. And the supervisor told her to leave because she did, in fact, break the rules. But now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, are we, in fact, starving our mother to death? So I went in and asked her if she was hungry. And she said, what do you got? And again, it's the first words in weeks. And I said, anything you want. And she said, well, how about some pumpkin pie? And it was March at this point. This whole thing started the first week of February. So now we're into March, and it's not quite pumpkin pie season, but my brother lived locally, and he took the challenge on and went out and miraculously came back with a couple of pumpkin pies. And so we gave her the first bite and she spit that out because that was the first food in weeks. We said, well, that didn't go so well, but we tried again and it went great. She ate half the pie. The next day she finished off the next half and the second pie. And then she moved on to sherbet and then moved on to oatmeal. So it wasn't the best, I would say, food choices, but she was back. She was alert and she seemed happy that her kids were there. And in the book, I write that a chapter about a silent scream, and I think it was a cry for help. She was depressed, not happy with the current situation, even though she was in her home. I think she wanted to be surrounded by love, and so that all changed from that point. But yeah, so my life kind of changed too because I didn't move back right away. I stayed with her for a few months, and then. I think started to think about, my mom deserves better. So I've got to make some moves. So by the end of the year, I moved back into my childhood home, and that was that.
You moved obviously back into your childhood home. I mean, how difficult was it at that stage? Because you're kind of always brought up that our parents are going to look after us. And suddenly you got this whole role reversal thing going on, haven't you? And the fact that, you are now the primary carer.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I left when I was just after I turned 18, to go to college and never really moved back in. But we had people in the house that were overseeing household duties and things like that. They were doing shopping and cleaning and laundry and stuff for my mom. At that point, my mom could walk. She went to a senior center during the days, but she was kind of dependent on them, and I think they did not get along so well. So I had to move in. So I moved in, and I hadn't had roommates in decades. And now I have roommates. There was a family. It was 3 generations that were living upstairs. And so that was probably the most difficult part because I had to deal with them. We had to make an arrangement that was agreeable with all the siblings. There were 6 of us, and we all do agree. So my choice would have been to get rid of them pretty quick. But we let them live in our home, basically rent-free for another 6 months. So I had to deal with that. So that was very stressful. And it was a big difference once they left. Then it was just me and mom, and things got a little better. But yeah, it was quite a change. But I was open to it, and I think that was a big lesson that I learned. I went in saying, okay, my mom deserves better. I've got to make that happen. And as difficult as it's going to be, that choice was simple. The logistics were a little more difficult, but early on, I told my mom, I said, listen, if I do this, I asked her permission. I said, you want me to come back and make sure you're treated well? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, if I do it, I'm in charge at that point. And then her mood completely changed. And then I said, you must obey me now. And she puckered up for a kiss. And I wasn't sure if that was a sign of surrender or one wishing me luck. And so I gave her a kiss and hoped for the best. But my goal was to make her laugh at least once a day. And luckily, both of my parents were pretty funny people. So we had a lot of humor in the house. So she was fun. We had a lot of fun. I mean, my goal was to make it fun, and I'm pretty good at doing that. And I grew up that way with my folks. Any crises or stuff like that, we kind of handled it with humor as best we could.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
Some great guests lined up for the first few weeks of the new year here on The D Word. But if you've got a story to tell or a project you're working on that you'd like us to know about, it'd be great to hear from you. You can find Radio TDW on X, Facebook and Instagram, and the email is tdwradio@gmail.com. I'm chatting to Mark Stephen Porro about his book, A Cup of Tea on the Commode, which is certainly one of the best titles I've come across.
Well, my mother's favorite drink, and that was funny because I was the fifth child, so she was a coffee drinker until she was expecting me, and she lost the taste for it, so she switched to tea. So her favorite beverage was hot tea, skim milk, no sugar, and at that point, she couldn't walk or anything, so we set a commode next to her bed. And sometimes Mother Nature took a little longer than was comfortable. So I wanted to see if I could make her more comfortable while we waited for things to happen. And so I offered her her favorite beverage, and she said yes, and I gave it to her, and it became a hit. So every day she got a cup of tea on the commode.
It's a great title, and in terms of, I mean, tell me why a book? I know you've had a career in kind of media acting, etc. But you've gone through a pretty tough time, obviously, as well as having a lot of humour with your mum. Why and when did you decide you wanted to put all that down?
Well, I've always enjoyed recording family history. And monumental moments and stuff in our family. So that was kind of in me. And I always did this as a kid, I guess. And when we had family reunions, we would get together for. I think we did this for 13 years. The whole gang, three generations, would get together for a week at a various location, mostly in Eastern United States. And I would write a poem summing up the week. And then when people had big birthdays, I started originally with my dad when he turned 75. I gave him 75 memories. And then with my mom, 75 memories also. And then I invited my siblings and other relatives to join in and add memories to other people's birthdays when they hit like 30, 40, or 50. And then I took my dad to the little village where his father came from in Italy, and I shot a documentary of that so people could discover the same things we discovered. So when I was there with my mom, I always took notes because I didn't know what I was going to do with it. But even with my dad 14 years earlier, I was with him only for 8 days before he passed. But I took a lot of notes, and I said, I'm going to do something with this someday, whether it was going to be a screenplay, a poem, a short story, or what. And that will be the focus of the next book, will be more on my dad. But this one, I just took notes, shot a lot of videos and a lot of photographs because there were some very poignant and fun conversations that we had that I didn't want everybody else to miss out on. When you're doing 24/7 care, you get these moments you may never have again. And I didn't know how many of those we were going to have, so I recorded all of them. And then a few friends found out what I was doing, and they happened to be dealing with the same situation. So they were asking me, because they didn't do the 24/7, and they asked me for advice and stuff. And so I helped them. And then I said, if they're getting some benefit from this, I think we have something. There's got to be a lot more people who could benefit from these stories. And so a book seemed to be the thing the best to get out there. So there we go. So I never wrote a memoir before, but I studied the craft. And it took a number of years to write it. I needed distance. So I moved to France in 2016, a couple of years after my mom passed. And I'm a very emotional guy, and obviously it was a pretty emotional ride. But I needed distance before I could sit and write without bawling all over the place, which I still did, 7 or so years later. But that really helped. And then studying memoir, how to write a memoir and be effective with that. So I got some coaching and on that, and did a lot of research, and then did research for end of life experiences and things like that. So it's not a how-to book; it's a what I did book. So people will get some tips, I guess, because I was pretty successful in my approach, the unique approach from a son taking care of his mom. And if nothing else, they'll be entertained because there's a lot of laughs in there too. A lot of friends have said I laugh and cry sometimes at the same place. But it's a fun, entertaining book as well.
And when you said in terms of your role as a carer, firstly as a male carer, perhaps that it's not as unusual, but it's still probably more unusual.
Yeah.
And also a male carer of a female parent, that must have posed some interesting things about it as well.
Yeah, when you first see your at that point, my mom turned 90 when I was taking over. Yeah, so you're seeing your 90-year-old mother naked for the first time, and you see what age has done to her. And she had open heart surgery years before, and now she has a pacemaker in her chest. And yeah, it was a little shocking, but I assumed the role of the caregiver. So you got to get over it and get on with it because I had a job to do. So, and maybe the acting experience came in very handy because I was able to say, okay, this is the new role. I'm a caregiver. I'll deal with the son later, but it still is your mother. You have to keep that in mind. And but yeah, and there was no lines that we did not cross because with hospice, I learned everything: how to take care of bed sores, how to take care of things that weren't coming out of the body when they were supposed to, or on whom, and stuff like that. So it was quite an adjustment. Again, it was like a first-time parent. So I learned on the fly, and we did pretty good, but there were some times I made some mistakes or I got a little angry, not at my mother, so to speak, but I got angry at the situation, with the frustration. So my mother never swore. My father didn't either. They were very good people. They said funny words instead. And but I did swear, and I still do. I have a couple of favorite words. Anyway, so when I got frustrated, I would swear, and my mother would get upset, and I would apologize and say, listen, I'm sorry, but this parenting thing is hard. And she says, I guess, but I never swore. And this was a mother of six. So I said, okay, I got it. She was very good at guilt tripping. So I had to be very careful because I didn't want to upset her too much. So I've got pretty good control over the words when I need to.
My guest this week is Mark Stephen Porro, and we're talking about A Cup of Tea on the Commode, which is available via all major booksellers. Yeah, I mean, did you feel a close relationship come with your mum and maybe share things and know things that you didn't know about?
Yeah. Well, what was funny is, all right, so she has 6 kids. I'm the only one who is caring for her 24/7, and which includes wiping her butt. And so she did have some bouts of dementia. And later on, a doctor did test her and said she has a bit of Alzheimer's. And so one morning, she greeted me with a big smile, and she says, "And what is it I call you?" And I thought she was joking because she had a pretty good sense of humor. And I said, are you kidding? And she says, no. And I said, name your children. And she named everybody: Laurel, Michael, Carol, David, DC. And she had no clue. So I said, I'm Mark. And she goes, oh, okay, Mark. Mark with a K? So she still didn't make the connection. I'm her son. And I said, yes, Mark with a K, your favorite son. And she says, I don't have favorites. I said, well, you have a favorite to forget. So to get over this emotional punch to the gut, I printed my name, M-A-R-K, on big block letters and taped it to the ceiling, because normally when I would greet her in the morning, she'd be laying in bed. So it started to become a game. It worked out very well, but I would come in the morning and say, good morning, and she'd say, hi, and then her eyes would shoot up to the ceiling and then say, Mark, and she was so happy and proud. So it worked out quite well, and then eventually she got to know who I was. So there was very little of that, but she had a lot of interesting visions early on. Most were pleasant, which was good, but she had a parade of children. she saw all the time outside her bedroom window. This was the one that she saw the most frequently. And it was a parade of school children about eight, I guess, 8 years old, boys and girls, marching down our street. We grew up on a cul-de-sac. And they were marching around the cul-de-sac, and they would stop by her window and wave. And they were carrying, she gave such good detail. They had white frilly dresses. The girls and the boys were in starched shirts with ties and shiny shoes. And the boys carried balloons and the girls carried flowers. And it was fascinating the first time I heard this. And then I got a little worried because you don't know if that's someone, an old relative or something calling, saying, come, cross over. And so I said, do you, any relatives? And she says, no. And I said, do you know any of them? And she says, not sure. And I said, are any asking you to join them? And she said, maybe. And I said, come on. And she said, no. And I said, so I felt a little better about that. But she had other ones where she had, there were kids on the ceiling. And you have to roll with the punches. I mean, they were fun. So she says, oh, look at all the chocolate coats on the ceiling. I said, chocolate coats, are they chocolate colored or are they made of chocolate? She says, chocolate colored, silly. I said, you're seeing kids with chocolate coats on the ceiling, and I'm being silly. So we would have a fun little, conversations about these things. But it was fascinating because, we all, we're going to go through this, I think, at some point. And so if you face it, I guess, with certainly an open mind and definitely an open heart, it makes it much better. There's no judging or anything like that. It's like, hey, this is the way it is. And it was, it was good. And so I wanted to make sure that other people knew this, and especially family members, because they wanted to learn about their mom and their grandmother. And some of the stories, maybe I went a little too far because I have, I wanted this to be an honest and open book. So there's a lot of people who have read it and go, wow, I know you much better than I thought. So I take that as a compliment. That's a good thing. Though some of my family members might go, you shared a little too much there.
Yeah, I think you should. And, I think it's a very brave thing because a lot of people would find it difficult to portray all those things that you went through. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly, isn't it, basically, in everything you've gone through as a carer. It's still pretty brave to put all that out there for, people to read in a book. Yeah.
Well, it was a good experience and an important experience, and I think people, hopefully will get something out of it. What was interesting about, or the most difficult part about writing the story was the structuring it to make it, I guess, fun and interesting for outside of other readers. And so I have a lot of flashbacks. I go through somewhat chronologically my experience. It was a 3.5-year journey, but I have earlier scenes in life that helped inform those current situations, because the way I was brought up, or some of my own experiences that I had in my own adult life. And it all kind of makes sense. But yeah, if you read a certain chapter and then you go, okay, so the previous chapter makes that a little more clear why he did that and stuff like that. And so, that was the most difficult part for me. But once you open that door of stories, I have a pretty good memory. I have a couple of vivid memories from 2 years old. And so once you spark, let's say, one memory, that would open the door to other ones. So it was, there were plenty. That's why I say, well, okay, this is a good memory and something I think is important, but it may not be right for this book. So that may go into another book. And so I certainly kept those for future use. But yeah.
Sure. I mean, what's the general reaction been? I mean, I read a lovely review, which had a really nice line in it. It said, this book was like sitting down at the kitchen table and sharing troubles with an old friend, which I thought was a lovely sentence. I mean, what's the general feeling about the book, Ben?
I think most of them have been like that. I've been, it's very humbling because you never know. And again, you put your heart and soul into something and you don't know how people are going to react. I knew it was good. I knew it was good when I found a publisher that liked it. They said, "We like your voice." And they said the same thing. It's very conversational. The topic is certainly universal and very timely. And so they were very excited about that. But you don't know until you put it out in the public. So most people have had very good reactions. They've had, again, the laughs are very important, but there's the tears too. I had one friend who just lost her father about a month earlier. And she said, "Mark, I'd love to support you and get the book, but it's just way too soon." And I said, "Absolutely. There's no rush. Please you take care of yourself." Well, about a month later, she was flying from LA back to New York, where she was originally from, for a holiday. And she took the book and she, on Facebook, did updates of, "I'm on this chapter and I'm so glad I'm reading this. I'm laughing and crying at the same time, but I love this book." And it was lovely because that was very soon. And she said she wanted 2 other copies because her brother and her sister were the main caregivers for her father. And so she said it was important for her to get copies to them. And then the sister who read it, who I don't know, also wrote a beautiful review. And now she's a friend on Facebook and stuff like that. So it's nice that it touches certain people. And then there's people from my hometown who I haven't been in touch with for, probably 50 years, who are finding out about the book because there's a lot of stories about that town, and it took place in that town, most of it. And they're getting a lot out of it and enjoying reminiscing about what was going on in our village way back when and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's been very nice. And then people who've just found the book and what they say, they relate to it. They either went through the same situation, so they wanted to hear a different perspective, or they're going to be going through this. They say that by, I think, 2046, there's going to be by 2050, I think 426 million people over 80 years old in the world. So this could be a health crisis unless we start taking care of our family members and stuff like that. So I think it's definitely timely, and especially with the baby boomers, we're going to have to deal with this. Fortunately, I've done it, and so I'm hoping that my story will help other people either get through it or learn from it. If nothing else, laugh at a situation where you want to cry. Laughing is good. If that doesn't work, there's always red wine. I suggest that in parenting. Wine is key.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.